Alright, hi everybody. So I want to show you the soldering part of the swirly wirework etched and soldered earrings. So some of the things that we're going to be working with are, we've got some, well in this case, these are mother of pearl 4mm cabochons that I got from Thunderbird Jewelry Supply. And then I've got the corresponding 4mm pre-made sterling silver bezel cups. So I like working with the pre-made bezel cups when they're this size, just so that they're a little less putsy. Okay. So then I've got two 6-inch lengths of copper wire in this case, just because I want the contrast of color that the copper provides. Now you do need to be aware that the reason that solder doesn't flow at high temperatures is because oxidation of copper at high temperatures, it just creates oxidation that prevents solder from flowing into the molecular structure of the silver. And so that's why solder is necessary, because solder binds with the oxygen, so that inhibits the creation of the oxidation. And I realize I'm getting kind of technical here, but using copper, because it's all copper, makes it extra important to coat everything really well with flux. I hope I said that right before. So flux, we need to cover it with flux. So let me get a couple more things ready and I'll show you that next part. Alright, now like I said in my blog post about different kinds of soldering fluxes, there are barrier fluxes and there are flow fluxes. So for my barrier flux, I'm using this solution of denatured alcohol and boric acid. It's just in a well-sealed jar in a ratio of about 1:1. And then for my flow flux, I like to use Rio's Mighty Flux, and then you just put that at the place where the joint is going to be. So now I'm just going to take, well first of all you need to make sure that your metal is really clean. So I'm just going to take a really fine sandpaper. This is 600, and I just like to make sure that that's clean of all surface oils. I'm just pulling it through here. Surface oils and dirt, any oxidation, you want that all to be gone. And I'm just going to wipe any, because I'm classy like this, I'm just going to wipe it off on my shirt. And then I'm going to take a round nose pliers, and I'm just going to form the end of this wire into a 4mm semicircle that's going to fit around that bezel cup. So just grab it. Now like any good loop, you want to grab it so that the end of the wire is sort of in the middle of your round nose pliers, and then just turn it. Well, like as if you can see that. Okay, so just turn it. Now we can see that that's a little bit too small, which is fine. We'll just take our pliers and enlarge that loop by moving it further down on my jaws. And you can see I've got a pretty big round nose pliers here that I just picked up at the hardware store. It kind of pays to have a pretty wide variety, and just here I can show you I have many pairs on these, and don't forget to use my nice Xeron for the really fine gemstone work I do. So although obviously I didn't acquire all of these all at one time, I've been doing this for quite a while. It does pay sometimes to pick up that cheap pair of pliers, just because sometimes they're bigger than some of the finer jewelry ones, and so they work for different things. So again, just a tiny bit here at the end is still a tiny bit too small. So just gonna play with it a little bit. And that's the thing about jewelry making that I think a lot of people don't realize is people who produce high quality work aren't necessarily just more gifted Sometimes they just pay more attention to the details. Sometimes they're just more willing to spend time on it. And so I think that that's a valuable lesson. You know, really spend time making sure that you're doing it right. That's almost right. There, yeah. So it fits in there really snugly. And with any soldering, that's the key to a perfect joint, is making sure that it fits really snugly. And in the case with these bezel cabochons, or in the case of the bezels that the cabochons will be in, you need the wire to attach. Here, let me show you. You need the wire to attach at the bottom of the bezel cup and not the top where you're going to close it, because otherwise you won't have any, you won't have access to the lip of this bezel cup so that you can secure the metal over your cabochon. So again, the wire that you're soldering onto the bezel cup has to solder on here, has to solder on here at the bottom and not by the top. Okay, so we're just going to place that in. Excellent. And that fits. Now we're going to use, again, our barrier flux. We're just going to dip it in. I like using a really sharp pearl knotting tweezer. I happen to get these at a place called Axeman here in the Twin Cities, which is a surplus store. And they make a lot of this stuff available for pretty inexpensive. So now I'm just dipping it in the jar wherever I think I'm going to have heat, so I don't actually need to dip that whole wire, just the part that's going to get hot. Alright, and then the fun part, which is drying it. In this case, I'm just going to use the outer reaches of my flame until we can kind of see. Oh, there, and that's just going to burn right off. That's very cool. It's like chemistry class all over again. Alright, so just until you can kind of see a fine coating of white so that you know that it's protected. And that's going to prevent the buildup of fire scale. Alright, and this is warm, so I'm not going to touch anything now with my hands. And actually, I'm not even going to use this fire brick because I'm noticing that things aren't lying as flat as I would like. And I definitely want things to lie flat so I don't have to support them as I'm soldering. Okay, and I'm just, again, I just really want to take my time and make sure that things are going to lay the way I want them to. And so, what's nice about the charcoal soldering block is that it reflects heat really, really well. And because this is such a fine gauge bezel cup, we're not actually going to apply the flame directly to the bezel cup. We need to apply the flame around the bezel cup and let the radiant heat do the work. And so this perforated ceramic firing surface will also work really well. For me, I just find that it doesn't, that it takes a little bit longer to reflect the heat. Again, this is a 20-gauge copper wire and a pre-made 4mm bezel cup. And again, that's from Thunderbird Supply. Santa Fe Thunderbird, well, something like that. Now I just use a mandrel here to apply the flux. Okay. Okay. Looks good. So, flux done. Now solder. Now because I've applied flux, I could just use plain silver pallions, but because I really like to use paste solder in a syringe because I can put it exactly where I want it. In this case, I'm going to take out my bezel cup. I should be wearing gloves because every time I touch it, the oils of my hands get on that bezel cup. And so after you clean it, after you kind of sand and wipe the surface, you shouldn't touch it with your bare hands after that. So we'll see how this works. And again, this isn't going to be a load-bearing solder joint, so I'm not probably as worried about it as maybe I could be. So let's use our tweezers. And again, like any solder, it will flow once it gets up to temperature, so I don't need to have solder all the way around that ring. I just need to have it in a couple places where I know that there's going to be a tight connection to my bezel cup. Okay. Just use the back of my tweezers here to push it on. And again, not too hard, because I really want to make sure that I'm not getting my wire up by the lip of that bezel cup. So now I'm set, and for me the absolutely most important part to successful soldering is to turn out all of the lights so that I can see the color of the metal and I can see the point at which the solder flows. Because as soon as that solder flows, I want to remove the heat to prevent any more oxides from building up, because again, it's at those high temperatures that the metal achieves in the flame that invites the absorption of oxygen to those copper molecules. So I'm turning off my light. And there's still some light in this room. I have to turn on. Oh. So much for my self-igniting torch. There we go. So again, we are focusing our flame around, and we're heating up this ceramic material so that the radiant heat from the ceramic is actually what's going to solder the metals together. Now it may be hard for you to see in the video, but I can already see the reflecting heat is starting to turn the bezel cup orange. And so here I'm just going to apply some heat to the wire, and that will transfer down by the bezel cup. And again, the tip of my flame isn't on the bezel cup at all. Okay, and so now we're getting close to the soldering temperature, and I can tell that because the metal is a dull red. And so then I kind of very quickly there we go. And the solder is flowing. So we remove the heat, turn on our lights again, let the video adjust. We're going to let that cool just a bit before we quench it. Water. And again, you don't have to quench it in water. You just do if you want to touch it right away. And so we'll be right back then, and I will show you the joint up close. So now, the sign of a successful soldering job is that fine ring of solder that goes between the metal wire and the bezel cup, and I hope you can see that there. And that's how you know the solder is flowed. And hopefully, if everything was clean, that's also how you know that that bezel cup isn't going anywhere. And you can see here, the wire is near the bottom, but it's not quite as near the bottom as I would like. So that may be a challenge to set the cabochon in there. But as long as you've got, as long as you've got some sterling metal there at the top, you should be good to go. So that is the soldering part that you need to know for these swirly wrapped wire soldered and etched earrings. Thanks for